And let's get into our session. So look at that, SQL Saturday 1000. I like the number, no? 1000 rounded, just perfect.
Yeah, we paid dearly for that.
You paid the
Yes.
that was an extra price. Nice. So yeah, thanks to the sponsors. I have heard that Marquand works on the Power BI space, and Power BI is another product that I cherish a lot. So if you need any assistance with Power BI, I would recommend getting in contact with those guys. All right, so let's talk about Azure Synapse. But again, my name is Armando Lacerda, there on the slide, and I would be honored if you care to connect with me on LinkedIn. I love to get in contact with people there. Or Twitter. My handle on Twitter is AR, the first two letters, and then the last name, AR Lacerda. Or just look by my name, you're gonna find me there. I don't tweet much, but I do belong to a good circle of MVPs. I'm also an MVP, and we share each other's content. So go ahead, get connected there. That'll be great to be your friend on LinkedIn. And before we get deep into Synapse, get into the. Oh, sorry. I thought I had this slide removed. This was from a previous presentation from another SQL Saturday. Let me get this one off. It's from other user groups. So back in here, yeah, this one. I want you to take a screenshot of this one here. This is a SQL Saturday event, so it's all about SQL Server. And Microsoft shared these two links about SQL Server 2019, which I highly recommend. There are a lot of exercises and workshops in this workshops link. And the thing is, every time Microsoft releases a new version of SQL Server, people tend to keep using the new version like the old one. They don't care much about the new things that came in the product, the new features. And I have another session that I present some other groups called SQL Server is not your daddy's relational database engine, because there are so much new things. There are very good new features, and I highly recommend you to take a look on this one here. Synapse, the heart of Azure Synapse is SQL Server. It's not the same SQL Server that you get when you install SQL Server 2019. It's not the same SQL Server from past offers in Azure, but is the same basic engine. It just is another different release schedule. And a lot of the things that are there in Synapse are features that are in SQL Server 2019, just preset on a particular way. So when you get to learn SQL 2019 and specifically its new features around Polybase, for instance, you get a good footprint into Synapse and how Synapse works. With that in mind, let's go into Synapse. We had an earlier session this morning, which I was a moderator for the session too, with Dennis. Dennis is another MVP down from Malta in Italy, the island there in Italy. He also presented a little bit on this one here. I recommend you to take a look in there later. But I need to give you some, not to go back to understand the whole big pictures, and we're gonna dive into some specifics of the data engine. We need to understand where SQL Synapse came from and what this name came from. No, I have a strong belief that we are running out of technical terms. We start borrowing from other industries, like from the construction industries. We have data lakes and data sinks and pounds. And now with Synapse, we got it from anatomy, from the human body. So let's take a look on that one. In the beginning, what we had was SQL Server. When you go, let's really focus here on cloud computing and specifically on Azure offerings, right? Not Amazon AWS or Google Cloud, but specifically on Microsoft Azure. So in Microsoft Azure, from Microsoft, what we had was two distinct database offerings. We have SQLDB and its multiple options, SKUs, right? We got SQLDB on DTUs, on vCores, and then you have general purpose, you have business critical, we have hyperscale, serverless, you have a bunch of offers in there, but all of them are under the umbrella of SQLDB. And you have SQLDW. And or used to have, right, SQLDW. And the idea was like, if you're going to create a data warehouse, you go into SQL DW. SQL DW is like SQL Server on steroids, right? Just more powerful. And that was completely wrong. That was really, really, really wrong. There was a big disparity in features. For instance, in the beginning, the very early days of SQL DW, foreign keys were not supported. Primary keys were not supported on a particular table. So imagine you're creating a database, a transactional database without a primary key. Some people would like, what is that? Is no SQL? Bottom line is SQL DW, the data warehouse offering, although it was implemented on top of SQL Server, there was a lot of features that are either turned off or they just don't apply to the purpose of a data warehousing. And just because some people say, we're going to create a data warehouse database, they think about SQL DW. And there was another big mistake, some assumptions that people used to make, like last year, I think in Atlanta, SQL Saturday in Atlanta, I was talking to some attendee there, and she was like, we hired this company, we told them we want to create a data warehouse, and they spin up SQL DW, and it's so slow, and they think it's so expensive. How come it's so expensive and so slow? And then I asked her, what's the size of your data warehouse? And she was like, oh, it's a data warehouse. We combine data from all of our branches and other companies that are part of the same group. So we get this database of about 500 gigabytes. I said, well, no, this is not a data warehouse. This is a regular database. Because when we talk about data warehouse, we're talking about terabytes. Actually, you're not going to see Synapse, using the new name, or SQL DW back in the days, actually performing well and make the balance between the cost and performance if you're running anything that's smaller than 10 terabytes. Actually, 10 terabytes is kind of an entry point to the below the line of where you really get good performance and features for the debug. So it's really, really for large, somewhat larger data footprint, right? Data volumes. But there was SQL DW, and that's how things started and how they are different from each other. And from SQL DW, Microsoft came along with the concept of Synapse. It was actually announced at Ignite last year, not this year. They had a lot of new announcements around Synapse this year, but last year down in Orlando, they came up with this new name to the product. But there are two things in here. It's not just a new name to the product. It's actually a collection of products that are under the same umbrella, under the same name. So Synapse is not, although it's a service in the portal, I'm going to demonstrate that to you in a second. Although it's just a name in the service, in fact, when we start using it, you see that it's actually a collection of multiple other services. And these other services, if my slide moves, there we go. And these other services are these ones in here. We have the SQL pool, which is the one-to-one to SQL DW. So back then you had SQL DW, now we have Synapse, the SQL pool, Synapse Analytics for the SQL pool, that's the one-to-one. And then you have all other ones that are still in preview. And here's an important thing you have to keep in mind, right? If you are considering using Synapse as a solution for your company, the only thing that has SLA behind Synapse is Synapse SQL Analytics and the SQL pool, right? That's the only that is in GA. Everything else is still in preview, so there is no SLA, and they may misbehavior from time to time. I deal with this every single day. So I can tell you there are some things sometimes you bump into either feature limitations because it's under development, or you have to wait a little bit until they fix some bug that showed up, like there is one going on. Actually, a few going on. So, but those are the elements that you're going to find in there. I'm going to do a quick flyby with you in a second. The services are the same SQL engine, but with a new processing, with a new billing feature. So the SQL pool is the one that you sign up for performance, you get that pre-allocated to your service. So like I need 1,000 DWs, like two compute nodes, and you're gonna see compute nodes in a second. So I gotta get into SQL DW, and I deploy that, and I pay for the hour that I use, for the hour that's available to me, regardless if I use or not. On SQL on demand, what's gonna happen is you're gonna pay by the terabyte that your scripts process. So it's the same SQL database engine, pointing to databases that are there on the storage. And as you run queries, those queries, as they move data around, you're going to pay by the volume of data that will be moved around. So there's that SQL on-demand option is available for testing, but it lacks feature. It doesn't match one-to-one on SQL features when compared to SQL Pool. So look into the documentation. You gotta make sure that the features you depend on, you're looking for, are available in SQL on demand. And then it's the other aspects of Synapse that comprise the whole picture start coming up. The Sparks, the pipelines, the Power BI, and the environment where you do all of that, called the studio, the workspace studio. All of those are in preview, and in order for you to make sense of that, I have here a diagram that will kind of put all of this in perspective. So this particular architecture diagram, you can find it on architecture reference from Microsoft. If you Google docs.microsoft.com data platform architecture reference, you're going to find a few of them, and this is one of them. And here's a very simple, traditional one about how to process data in the cloud, right? And where's my mouse? Here's my mouse. So usually you get data coming from your sources, from your internal systems. So you have line of business applications. You may have sensors. IoT is a big deal nowadays, right? Smart cities and all of that. So you get all of this data coming from the systems that capture this data from line of business or sensors, whatever they are. And this data, it comes in some way into the cloud, right? They may be writing to SQL Server or some other data engine, even in other clouds, other cloud providers, right? AWS, Google Cloud, out there on the internet. So you have this data that are available. And either if they come from on-premise or if they're from the cloud, usually you're going to get this data imported into your data processing infrastructure. It could be by stream or by batches. Here in this architecture diagram, they just consider it by batches. So when you do by batch, meaning you're going to go and grab a bunch of data from time to time in batch, you probably going to rely on Azure Data Factory. This is the preferred service from Azure to create and orchestrate ETL tasks to grab data from the sources and land them somewhere in the clouds. They could be arriving, it could be sync. The actual term that is sync. Like I said, we are running out of technical terms. They could be synced into another database. It could be another SQL Server or some other database store. But usually the preferred destination is a lake, a data lake. So that data that comes from multiple places lands into the lake. And in Azure, we have the storage accounts. And the storage accounts, a particular storage account, when you create a storage account, it can be from multiple flavors, right? You can have, I think Gen 1 is still available, but shouldn't be used anymore. So you have the Gen 1, the Gen 2, you have Gen 2 with high performance, and you have Gen 2 as a data lake. So all of them are available there as storage accounts, and then you save your data on a particular flavor. The data lake is the preferred one, is the fastest one, has a bunch of extra features that the regular storage accounts with containers don't offer. But in any case, let's consider you're using a lake here. So here in the lake, usually the data is not structured. It's considered to be a lake because you just dump the data there and you're going to figure out how you're going to work that data later. And data scientists, they like to make sense of that data and start process that data using products like Azure Databricks that are created on top of a open source platform called Spark, Apache Sparks. So Databricks is de facto standard in terms of performance and stability, especially in the cloud. You can only find it in the cloud. So, very popular out there. We actually had the first session I moderated this morning was about Azure Databricks and how to do ETL in Azure Databricks. So if you want to take a look on that, take a look on track 7, the first session of the day. I think the recording will be available later. And then here, when the data is in the Databricks, you usually are consuming from the lake. Databricks can consume from multiple places, but they can't consume from the data lake. The point here where we get into Synapse is that the traditional one, remember there are two Synapse, right? There's this Synapse that's compatible with the SQL DW, the first one, and the Synapse that's in preview, right? There are a bunch of preview features in there. So when you get into Synapse, the idea is Synapse can get the data that's processed from Azure Databricks. Actually, Databricks will be writing data into Synapse, or Synapse can go by itself and collect the data from the lake. The point I need to, and of course, once the data is processed and crunched and aggregated in volume, and reduced in granularity, then we use whatever tool you want to use. Power BI is the Microsoft tool for that, but you can use Tableau, ClickView, whatever you want to do. The thing I want you to capture from this and understand where the new approach, from SQL DW to Synapse, the new approach, what it comes from is this. The term synapse is actually comes from our nerve cells, from the neurons. And the synapse is when a neuron sends information to the next one, is the neural connection. When one neuron sends information to the next nerve cell, to the next neuron. And the point in here, the comparison here is pretty much this. Each one of these elements is a service in itself. So if I want to deploy this in Azure today, I have to go into the portal and create a data factor and create the lake and spin up a Databricks cluster and create a Synapse SQL pool, and then wire up all these things together, make sure they have the accounts and the permissions to connect to all of those. And if this is supposed to be a secured environment, I have to create a VNet, and I have to put everybody connecting to this VNet and make sure that everybody gets permission to to talk to each other through that VNet and are isolated from the external world. I have a lot of work to do here in the infrastructure to get all of this to work. The idea of Synapse is to streamline, the new one that's coming, Stream Preview, is to streamline all of that. And when you ask to create Synapse, all of this is created at once in one shot. So you go there and say, you know what, I want to create a new Synapse Analytics. And when you define in which region that thing is going to live, all of these elements that are highlighted there on the screen are going to be created. All the resources are going to be created and will be available for you right after creation, and all wired up already, right? With the permissions and the connections, everything's supposed to be already talking to each other. It's not like that today. It's supposed to be, but there are some bugs going on. But we can make them work. They're working for me in a couple projects I'm working on. So this is the big deal about Synapse, the whole integration, so you can get from ingestion to presentation to consumption in a way shorter time, because you don't have to worry about connecting all of these elements. But there are some gotchas in here that are very important for you to make note, right? I should have written this here on the slide. Actually, gonna back in here and right on top of this. Let me get here text. So this is recorded. So when it gets to Synapse, when you spin up Synapse, Synapse does not spin up a Databricks cluster for you when you're doing Synapse. So you're not going to find Databricks. Instead of having Databricks, what you're going to find in there is, where is it here? There we go. What you're going to find in there is, sorry, let's get this way. click somewhere else. There we go. Apache Spark, and move this to the right place. So instead of a Databricks, what you're going to find in here is Apache Spark. They're actually open source code base with some tweaks from the product team, from Microsoft Synapse product team, for specifics for the platform. So the message here, the bottom line here is you're going to find the same, about the same experience when you do that in the regular Synapse. But whatever is specific for Databricks, of course, it will not be available, will not be the same in Synapse. Which means that if you have some Jupyter notebooks for Databricks that are using particular libraries for Databricks, those scripts will not work in Synapse. The other thing that's not the same when we run Synapse is the Azure Data Factory. So when you spin up Synapse, you're not going to find an option for the Data Factory there. What you're going to find in there is a compatible, similar offering, and the naming there is called pipelines. You're going to find pipelines in there. And the pipelines overall, they work pretty close to Azure, to Data Factory. There are some little differences in there. You're going to see if you go into the interface, they start using some elements in there. The data sets, they have distinct behavior in the pipelines, but they offer, or they are for the same purpose. And actually the interface is pretty much the same. It's almost exactly the same interface from ADF. The name has changed because the actual ADF outside Synapse is backed by Databricks. So when you do data flows, it's a Databricks cluster supporting those data flows. And when you do Synapse, what is supporting the data flows in Synapse is Apache Spark cluster, not the Databricks cluster. So these three elements, that is two changes, is just the engine that is supporting the scripts behind the scenes. So this is Synapse, right? Synapse is this whole thing here all together. And I think it's time to go on our first demo here on a flyby and see how these things are created and how they look like after creation, okay? So let's take a look in here. And if there are any questions, you can bring them up.
We do not have any questions yet.
Oh, everybody's asleep. 7 o'clock, 7:27. All right.
But we are gaining more attendees as you go, though.
That's good. Well, that's good. Welcome. If you got here late, don't forget this. I think this thing is being recorded, so you can catch up whatever you have missed later. Let's do here a SQL Saturday 1000 demo, very quick, just to have something here. Actually, I have already created the elements. I just want to show you some of the steps of creating the services. So I'm going to make a distinct resource group here for that. Here's for my demo. And let's go ahead and add the resource. So if I go here and do Synapse and look for Synapse, I will see here, I'm not sure if Zoom Meet is here. Nah, it's not in my VM. Sorry about that. Gotta zoom into my VM someday. So let me do it here again, Synapse. So noticing here that we have two Synapse in here, right? We have Azure Synapse Analytics Workspace Preview and some noise in here. And down here, the last option here, Azure Synapse Analytics, formerly SQL DW. So these are the two Synapse I just mentioned to you, right? This down one here is the one that is GA. And the only thing that's in there is the SQL pool. I'm gonna demo it for you in a second. And this one over here is the one that has the SQL pool, that is GA, and all other features, all other elements, they are still in preview, including the workspace. So let's start with this one here first. And I'm just going to go through the steps so you can understand the steps. Like I said, they are already created, so I kind of save time for us on that one. But let's see what it entails to create one of these things. So got the right works resource grouping here. So like the regular one, like the regular SQL offering, you're gonna create a name for the database. So if you go to other SQL offerings, gonna call this a database, but here it's called the SQL pool, and it is a SQL pool because you're gonna depending on the service level you sign up for, you're going to have multiple nodes. After this demo, we're going to go into the details of these nodes. So let's say here, demo 1000. And actually, let's gonna create a new server for this. So demo 1000. I like this 1000 thing. And it's available. Look at that. And SQL admin and some password. Sorry. Okay. If I type it right, yes, I did. Yeah. And S2, S2. There we go. So this is going to be, it would be the servant, right? I'm going to create it. And here is the consumption plan for, this is actually associated to the pool, not to the server, like the other offerings in SQL Pass in Azure, right? So make sure you understand that this performance levels in here, these SKUs are associated to the SQL pool, not to the server. So there we go. This is the only thing it actually needs, right? The other elements are like plumbing, right? It's just the network firewall and elements for the firewall. And when you are doing the regular Synapse analytics, you can have the Adventure works if you want to have your database associated with something. And again, this thing here, it's minuscule, right? This sample database is ridiculous. So, get something better. I'm going to show you where you can get something better in GitHub and some other resources. So after that, that's the only thing I got to do. And if I click create here, the process will start. And notice that I will be paying $12 an hour for the SQL DW, for the Synapse DW 1000. And you're going to see what that means in a second. All right, so this is what it takes if I want to create a regular, and this is production, SLA, like I mentioned, it can go production today, right? The other one I can create is the preview, Synapse. So if I go here and look into the workspace preview, you see they change positions all the time. So you gotta make sure you're selecting the right one. This is the guy, workspace preview. It was at the top first, now it was at the very bottom. There you go, workspace preview, create. And you're gonna see the options here. They kind of resemble, but they're a little bit different. Again, a resource group, you gotta have one. And then you see, it asks you for the workspace. So the workspace, the idea of the workspace is the umbrella that will aggregate all of the service together. So through the workspace, and also known as the studio, you're gonna have access to all of the services here once Synapse Analytics is deployed for you. So that's the idea of this workspace. So I go here, do a demo 1000, and it's gonna complain because of the casing. See, the demo here is uppercase. And the reason for that is because the storage account doesn't support it, and the lake is included in what we're doing, and case sensitive applies to the lake. So they kind of force you to use everything on lowercase when you do these names in here. And it suggests me to go to Europe. Sorry, Europe doesn't like people flying from America at this nowadays. So I got to stay here in the West Coast. West US too. There we go. And again, an account in here. Account name. You see, you need a data lake, so it's gonna ask you for the data lake. Come on, stay there. It's gonna ask you for the data lake. So demo 1000. Hopefully that it's still available. There we go. And a file system inside the lake. if you're familiar with the storage accounts, so we create a storage account, which will be, the lake, and within that storage account, you can create multiple file systems if it's a lake, or multiple containers if it's a regular Gen 2 storage account. So this one here is going to be like my sink. Data will sync. And I'm going to assign permissions automatically so all the services can talk to this guy. So notice that, like I said, like this diagram here tries to portray the Synapse and all other services, they will be looking for a lake where they can talk to, write to, and read from. So therefore, creating the lake is part of the creation here for that reason. And I love the fact that they got away with that demo thing. So it's just the user account. And this account here is for the workspace. It's usually the one you don't want to share with anybody. It's like the SA account for a regular SQL account is the one nobody should be using, right? There are other ways to assign Azure Active Directory account permissions to the service. But anyways, you always have to have a backdoor. Nope, don't have to keep it there. Here's the network connectivity, so allow connections. And yeah, so this one here is another thing we don't have when you do the regular Synapse. It's important one, is recommended to get this thing on, because like when you create Synapse Analytics, in the workspace, you can have multiple SQL pools. Like in this diagram here, Synapse shows only once, but actually you're going to see in the interface, I can have multiple Synapse Analytics, and each one of them, each SQL pool can be assisting a group of people, according to the budget they have for computing, and they can be using the same lake where the data is being collected from, which is super cool, right? Like, I have 3 departments in my company, so accounting get this budget for data crunching, and data science get this budget for crunching, so they can run their own SQL pools, which is computing, right, on top of the same lake, right, top of the same data. The point here is because they have these multiple pools, either Spark pools or SQL pools, they need network connectivity. And if this thing here is supposed to be secured, like, on my lake to talk only to my services inside my Synapse Studio, I must actually enable the managed virtual network, because virtual network is what keeps the network traffic isolated. And the fact that it's managed, it means that every time I create a new pool or a new Spark cluster, it will be connected to that VNet for me. Like I said, I don't have to worry about all the private links that needs to be put in place. So this is a big, big, big deal to help out with security and streamline availability for data crunch. So, now this interface, I hope they make more sense, right? When you look at these things, I hope it makes more sense, because, these questions are all about integrating all of those elements. So I'm going to cancel this guy here, and I'm going to show you how they look like after created. So if I go here to SQL Saturday 1000, I already have them in here. They're already created. And notice that I have my Synapse SQL pool service, and I have my Synapse workspace. So this one here is, oh Jesus, this came down 1000, supposed to be 100. Anyways, so I'm gonna run out of money this before the end of the session. So you see, I have these two here. One is the new one, and the other one is the traditional one, right? The one that's still GA. So if I click on this guy here, what I see here is my interface, right? It's just the portal in there with the elements, the regular configuration options in there, and some helpers to get firewalls attached and to get data into Power BI. Actually, this one doesn't even go to Power BI. This one here is the one that goes to analysis service, so you can ingest data analysis service, but you have to create the service on your own and do all the wiring there. It tries to help you, but it's really just the SQL pool in there. So this is the traditional one. There is no much in here, not much in here. It's just the elements. So look at this here, right? Welcome to Synapse Analytics, formerly known as SQL Data Warehouse. This is the traditional one. If I go back there and go to this guy here, of course, sorry about that, I forgot to mention this. So on the traditional one here, if I go here into connection strings, I can see how to get connected right from an application. Like if I want to go to SSM, connect there through SSMS, I just have to talk to the server naming there, right? The regular server naming there. So if I get this guy here and I do SSMS, checking time here, I'm doing on time, or Data Studio, Azure Data Studio, right? Whatever tool you want to connect. So we can get to these tools and just connect to those guys. And what was the, hope it was this one here. I can't remember what name I used for that guy. Got to rewind on the tape if this one doesn't work. Actually, I have the password here. So this one should work. Control V and connect. There we go. So I'm connecting there and should be empty, right? Actually, this one may have added the sample database. So yeah, there we go. Connected, same way you usually do, and you just have fun with the queries. Usually get some warnings in here. I think I have already disabled my one when you go to SQL DW because it's not the same full-featured engine. It's the same core engine, but not the same full-feature engine. So when you do it for the first time, you may get some warning messages in there. So if I go do this one here, execute, and I'm not on the master database, but on the sample one. There we go. I'm going to see my data. So this data came from SQL DW, and life is as usual, right? From this point here. Very nice. Let me make sure on something here. Oh, no, there we go. Performance level 100. I knew I have made it 100. I don't want to break the bank. I just want to make sure I had enough money to do the other demos. So let's go ahead and take a look on the other one. So back to the resource groups, and let's see how different that one looks like. Back in here, and let's see the new one, the one you guys want to use. So when I get in here into the new one, you see I got the same thing, it looks like the same, right? The same portal, but get way more information. So I have, manage identity ID for the application as a whole, so I can give permission to other resources in Azure if I have to. I got here my user and my Active Directory account that's associated as an administrator to that one. The SQL endpoint I can connect to from SSMS. And down here, I have my pool. See, I got one SQL pool created here, and this one is the one on demand. I didn't get to create a regular SQL pool like the one that would be compatible with SQL DW. So this one here lacks features, right, when compared to GA. So if I want to create a new SQL pool and run a new database like the one we have just connected to from the regular GA, I go here into new SQL pool, and I created one from here, right? And get this one down. I don't want to pay too much money for this thing. And SQL Saturday Oregon 1000 demo. There we go. Should not be greater, so too many characters. Better, 100. All right, it doesn't like the 1000. I'm gonna keep 100. Auditing elements. So using exist data. Yeah, see, it's no sample. If you have a backup to restore, you can. So let's go ahead and just create it, and a new SQL pool will be created. So, so this process. Let me go back there to the front end there. What is it? This one. So this process here is where I manage the service. So I can add as many SQL pools as I want. Like I said, your departments can have multiple SQL pools, each department for a SQL pool, for instance, and they can all be collecting data from the same lake and crunch data from there on their particular budgets, which is a great thing. And then we can have, you can also add your Apache Spark pools, right? Which will be the same idea. You can have multiple pools, and you can assign departments or divisions of your company to particular pools, and these pools could share the same data, could work on particular regions of the lake for each one of these pools. It's fully managed by you, right? Whatever you want to do. So here's we create a new SQL pool, and here's where you would create a new Apache Spark pool, right? Either one. But the big deal here is if I want to deal with these guys, if I want to manage these guys, and if I want to pump data in, remember the pipeline, I don't do that from here. What I got to do is I need to go to the workspace. See, there's here, workspace, or the Synapse Studio, right? They all kind of land in the same place. So if I click in here, a new tab shows up, and this one here, of course, it doesn't follow the same theme, right? I got it dark in here, and this one blinds me because it comes boom. Something bad just happened. Your browser is blocking third-party cookies. Which browser am I using? Chrome. Why? See, the gods of demos are not happy with me today. Let me try this one here, see if it goes through. There wasn't an option here for me to say accept, but it blocked. So let me try another browser.
An anti-Chrome product.
Actually, Chrome is a first-class browser for Azure. It's a funny thing. It's not supposed to fail. And I think I did not mention that in my introduction. I work for Intellect. I'm a senior data platform guy there with Intellect, and I'm using the account they provide for us to do tests in these things. So they kind of sponsored this particular demo for you guys. Let's try it again. Studio. And going once, going twice. I do accept these cookies. Let them come through. There we go.
See, you just have to use a Microsoft product.
Yeah, man. Antitrust. They're gonna be in trouble. So here's the studio, and here's where you find the other elements, right? You got here this integrate. The integrate is where the pipelines live. So if I go here, I can see I can create pipelines from here, and these pipelines, they do what ADF would do. Slightly different, it's not Databricks, so there are some differences that are going on in here, but the basics of it is pretty much the same. Even the interface looks really alike. Very interesting thing they have done here is all the supporting elements like the linked servers and the integration runtimes and the endpoints, they can be seen from here from manage. So it's a great thing to be able to manage these things from the workspace. That SQL pool that I just created, right, is ready. See, it's ready there for us. It's online, so I can come here in the SQL pool and copy the same connection string for that SQL pool and get connected from Management Studio same way. So if you are a Management Studio guy, that's my service. That is my password. And I should be able to connect from here. And there we are. But this database here doesn't have anything because you don't have that sample database anymore, right? So no tables there. Come on, show me there are no tables there. We know there are no tables there. We will figure that out sometime. But one interesting thing they have done here on the studio is that we have the ability to go over the databases in here. So I have my database here, I have my tables. Like I said, there are no tables in there. And I can come into here, into the database, and connect to other Synapse databases if there are others in there. Or I can go and connect to external data, which is data living on the lake. So if I have like CSV files or 4K files or some other files that are somewhat structured, it's not like images or things like that, but things I can kind of resemble table structure on top of them, I can go and connect from here, and I would be able to see them from here, from external tables right from here, right? Which is super cool. Another thing I can do from here is I can ditch management SSMS altogether and do all my SQL scripts straight from here. So if I go, see, this one is connecting to SQL on demand. If I could go into SQL Saturday pool, right? The pool created there, and do a create table here, sample table, column 1, integer, just to have something, and run, done, and insert into sample table values 1. Which is one of the things that Microsoft and the designers of this thing they came up with, which is like, if you are a data engineer and you are not a SQL person, more into Spark things, and are familiar with Jupyter notebooks, getting familiar with SQL Server would, with SSMS would, take you some learning curve, right? So if you do that from the browser, and you can do something similar to a Jupyter notebook straight from the browser, that will also make life easier for people to crunch data straight from Synapse. So you see, you can do either from there or from here. So it's a somewhat integrated environment. And that's pretty much like, the whole environment. If you have never seen this before, I hope this has given you some, flyby, 10,000 feet flyby going around. The whole thing about crunching data and data scientists, they would be working here if they were doing, Spark, Jupyter notebooks. They can go here into the notebooks, and when they create their notebook, I'm going to keep the name here. Just add a cell here for the code. So you can choose which language you want to do, Spark SQL, Spark Scala, Python, or C#. How about that, right? If you're connecting to a Spark pool, and then you can do your notebooks from here, right? No, I have no pools yet, so I would have to create one. So, but there you go, right? This is a fully integrated environment. And in terms of performance, Synapse has been tested is the only one that actually passed all the TPC criteria in terms of performance for data processing, right? Data crunching. So with that in mind, I'm going to head into the second and last half of this presentation, which is take a closer look to something that seems pretty obvious, which is our tables. But when you look into the Synapse SQL pool, there are very specific elements about the tables. So before I get in there, any questions on the demo or anything you like, anything in there, pending there?
We do not have questions. You're holding the audience, but no questions yet.
Oh man, I put them asleep.
It is late in the day.
Huh?
I said it is late in the day.
Yes, it is. It is. So the last thing I would like to make sure people understand about Synapse is a regular SQL deployment, like SQL business critical, or SQL general purpose, or SQL hyperscale, or even SQL VM, the regular deployment of a SQL VM. All of these options, they are out of the box, and in terms of SQL paths, they cannot change. They are what they consider SMP approach. And the SMP approach, the symmetric processing of the data is like, if you have 100 processing units and someone connects to your database, that session, that connection will not be able to consume your 100 units. The sessions, they are throttled, so they will not be able to, one particular session, stress out the database, unless if the database, you don't have 100 units, you have just 1 unit, then it's stressed out. But one session cannot stress out the regular deployment, medium to large deployment of a pass element. But in SQL DW, or rather saying in Synapse, what we have in Synapse is the MPP platform. And the idea of the MPP platform is to allow one particular session to leverage parallel processing, which means that if I have the same 100 processing units, I'm calling, generic term here, these processing units, but I have 100 processing units, one particular session could, trigger a query, could request a query, and that query could be parallelized, be put in processing parallel and consume your entire computing capacity for your service. So unlike SQL Server that's designed to support multiple sessions simultaneously, Synapse is designed to support fewer simultaneous connections. And when we do support multiple simultaneous connections, we have to understand how much resources each of one of these connections can use. And these resources, they are measured in this unit called the DWUs, right? The data warehouse units. And these data warehouse units, actually, I failed on that one here. I should have this thing already here. So let's Google this just quick. Site docs.microsoft. Oh, there we go. From other presentations. Data warehouse units. So we'll probably show up here somewhere. Let's see. Nope, not this page. Come on. Oh, there we go. So you see, these are the data warehousing units, right? It's kind of confusing. If you look in the portal, they show up as DWUs, data warehousing units. But here in some of the documentation, they just call it DWs, the same thing. So notice that from 100 to 500, you have one compute node. And here in my slide, this is the compute node. You see, you always have this control node, regardless of the DW sign up for. So client applications connect to this guy here. And when they send a query, this guy dispatches this query for the compute nodes you may have. And they will process your query in parallel. And this one will compute the final results and send to the client application. So if you have DW100 to DW500, you have just one computer, one SQL instance running behind the scenes with more or less vCores. You don't know how many vCores are in there, but more or less computing power and memory available to them, and the storage. Now notice that the storage is disconnected from the compute node. So unlike the other SQL offerings, when you do SQL offerings, if you have low computer capacity, you have less storage. There is a link in between how much you can process and how much you can store. In SQL DW, in Synapse, I'd rather say, in Synapse, there is no limit for storage. When you create a SQL pool, you have your storage available for that SQL pool. And that is it's virtually limitless. You can push as much data as you want. Microsoft guarantees they'll keep adding SSDs for you in the back end as crazy as you demand, as you require. So you truly get parallel processing as you go, if you go back here to the web page, as you go from DW1000 up, right? Then you get like 2 compute nodes, you get 3 compute nodes, you get 4, 6, and so on, all the way to 60 compute nodes, right? This is kind of expensive here. If you check the price later, you're going to see a few dozen thousand dollars. But again, this is all for parallel processing. So the first thing to keep in mind when you sign up for Synapse is this idea of the compute nodes. So this is the CPU, the core, the memory that crunch the data. The next thing is the distributions, right? You have these compute nodes. Actually, the distribution nodes. Sorry, you have the distribution nodes. So this diagram here came from Microsoft. It's a little confusing because the compute nodes is these guys we have seen here before, and the compute nodes they are just like a mentioning here, and these are the distributions. So here's the thing about the distributions. Distribution is your storage, is your where your data is really kept, and they have computing in there, unless if it's in the lake, it's external, right? But if it's inside the SQL pool, so they have some computing there to collect the data from the proprietary file format. And what happens is when you create a SQL pool, this distributed place to store the data is created, and it's split in 60 distribution nodes, right? Distribution elements in there. It's a fixed number. You cannot change it. It's a magic number. I asked the guys there at Microsoft once about this, and they said they did a bunch of measurements, and then they came up with this magic number that works best in the platform. So what ends up happening is when you create a table, as you add data to this table, the data from that unique table is always partitioned, is always distributed in this compute node, in these distribution nodes. So you always have 60 of them, and your table, portions of your table lands in portions of these distributions in here. And here is the basic simple element to understand the magic. Well, you're gonna go back to the website here. So look at this. If you sign up for SQL for DW1000, you got 2 compute nodes, which means that out of the 60 distribution storage that you have, 30 of them will always be associated to one compute node, and the other 30 to the other compute node, and so on, right? Like if you sign up for DW5000, you get 10 SQL servers behind the scene, 10 compute nodes, each one of them responsible for 6 storage distribution places. And it's always 6, and it's always the same 6, right? This doesn't change unless if you downgrade or upgrade your DWs, right? If you move from DW5000 to DW2000, so you decrease your computing units, which means the distribution of the data will be rearranged for the amount of computes you have right now. But once you moved and it's placed, your data distribution will never change. So when you create a table, in order to make sure that you have the best performance of that table processing, like when you do an aggregation, when you filter by dimensions and things like that, you want to make sure that the data that is needed for one particular compute node to process is available on the distributions that compute node is working on. And in order to control that, this slide here is just an illustration how the query comes in. So it goes to control node, goes to the compute node, they process the in parallel, the portions of the data they're responsible for, and then goes back to the client. I have already mentioned that. This is the point I really want to get to you. When you create a table in SQL Server, in Synapse, in order to control that the data that will be used by a compute node is always on the same collection of distributions, you have to choose how your table will be stored in those distributions. Because it's always partitioned, you have to come up with a partitioning strategy. It's going to be either hash or replicated. Either hash or round robin. Sorry about that. Either hash or round robin. So round robin is super simple, right? As the data comes in, one piece of the data goes into the first distribution, the next piece in the next distribution, the next piece in the next distribution. It goes super fast. It's the easiest one to do, but it's probably the worst one for performance, because when you ask like if you have 5 distributions and you ask those distributions, you have 5 compute nodes and you ask them to crunch data, more likely they will need information from each other. And I'm gonna browse back here a couple slides. This one here. As this compute node here processes data, if it understands that it needs data from this compute node, they can talk, they can exchange data. That's done through DMS, the data management system. They can talk to each other. But when they talk to each other, that's when you suffer in performance. So one of your goals as a data engineer, or if you want to call yourself a DBA for Synapse, is to make sure that the data that these guys will process will not have to come from other compute nodes. So if whatever they do within themselves, your data processing will be super fast, and then this one stitch everything together. But if they have to exchange with each other, then that is bad. And kind of wrapping up this presentation here, if we are talking about VI here, you are very familiar, I'm assuming, with like star schema. Star schema like this one here, right? You're familiar with the star schema where you have multiple dimension tables and a fact table, right? And usually the fact table is that one that goes into distributions, the huge one, the large one, the one with tons of data. But what about the dimension tables, right? The dimension tables, they tend to be smaller, and usually you have those dimension tables being used to filter data from all across the fact table. So if the goal of the fact table that's really big is to try to partition this data, so when a compute node processes the data from the fact table, process within itself, it doesn't go to the other compute nodes. These dimensions here, we just can't we just can't do the same thing, because dimensions will filter all the transactions for the fact tables. So for the dimensions themselves, there is another kind of table we can create in Synapse, which is the replicated tables. And the replicated tables, the way they work is once you create them and you populate it with data, populate with data, they're kept in here in the distributions, but they're very small. They're usually in one of the distributions. The trick with the replicated data is when you do a first select on the replicated table, what happens is these guys here, they will collect their portion of the data from the distributions, and right away they will replicate their portions to all others, like in a broadcast. They will replicate to each other. So each one of these nodes will have a full copy of what would be the dimension tables, right? That's the strategy, to use this thing for the dimension tables, which keeps the strategy intact. So if each one of these guys has a full copy of the dimension tables, when they start filtering the transactions coming from the fact tables, the filtering rows from the dimensions, they are in the compute node, so DMS is not needed. It's needed only on the first time we query that table to cause the replication. So the art of designing the table structures, right? I rather say, right, designing the schema and the data model, physical data model in Azure Synapse, is choosing the right type of table and the right distribution key, the hash key, for your fact tables, and be able to identify the tables that could be replicated, so they don't force the dynamic data exchange when you're doing your group bys and doing your joins for data distribution, right? For data compilation and then send to the clients. In a nutshell, that is Azure from back to back, and a deep dive on the most critical elements in the SQL pool which is the type of table you come to create. Oh, I had it here on the slide. Forgot I have added in here. So in the slide deck here, I have some definitions for those. You can find these definitions in the documentation, docs.microsoft.com. And that is pretty much what I have for tonight. With that in mind, let's see if I got lucky and people ask questions.
We do not yet have questions, but we've not lost our audience there. So it's an interesting topic. People are very, very interested and
Nice.
thinking learn about this, but we do not have any questions.
Okay, so I would like to.
Now, during your presentation, I actually did find something here in my bookcase behind me that I'll share with you, and that is that I found my beret. So I said I got to turn it around now. Oh, there we go.
Ah, you found it. There we go.
Yeah, the wrong side. Okay.
So now you're Synapse beret.
Yeah, I'm not wearing it right though. Okay, well, thank you so much, Armando. This was a fascinating presentation. This is a tool that I think is very top of mind for customers needing enterprise scale BI solutions. I know that in our business, we have a number of big clients who are either doing proof of concept projects or actually implementing, but pretty bleeding edge stuff.
Yeah, so it's important to keep in mind a lot of things in Synapse are in preview, but the core of it, which is the SQL pool, is being GA for years, and there are a lot of large companies already taking advantage of it. Actually, I just did a technical review in a book that's coming out for free from Microsoft in a couple of weeks, I rather say, with some use cases for that, with multiple petabytes of data use cases. So it's so reliable. It's the only one that passed all the TPC benchmarks.
Yes, I remember when the MPP appliances were released 10 years ago, and then they brought it into the cloud. So SQL Data Warehouse, you're right, is a very mature technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so have fun. A lot of the I did not show. If I let's still have a couple minutes. Let me share my screen here again. Forgot to mention this. And now here we go. Show back there. So if I go back,
just a comment while you're preparing that. Michael Irwin, a friend of the community and fellow Microsoftie. Michael says, no questions, Armando, because you explained all the data warehouse stuff. Lots better than most people I have seen. Very well done.
Oh, thank you. Wow, that's a big compliment. Appreciate. Thank you very much. So one last thing I would like to highlight in here is once you create your workspace, right? That is in the new one, in the preview one. Once you create your workspace, you have these things here they call the useful links, and there is this knowledge center here, which is super cool. So if you wanted to test drive things in Synapse, you can come to this knowledge center and it get you to samples that you can deploy immediately, like the New York tax cab in the tax database, the cab database. You can get these guys from GitHub, get the queries and get them deployed right away. See, if you just follow this thinking here, select the 500, gotta get money, right? You got the 500 DWs in there and use sample. It will deploy it for you and you can start using it straight through. See, the script is right here. And it will get your things going for you right away. Deployment is in progress. All right, my money is already being consumed. This can really help you getting up to speed and testing out. They have the examples for SQL Pool and for Sparks. So super cool.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for sticking around. And, well, this concludes Oregon SQL Saturday. This is our last session, and we appreciate your attendance. We appreciate your community involvement, as always. And, Armando, thank you to you for being willing to do such a late session.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, sharing your expertise and your involvement in the community over the years. So with that, everyone, we really appreciate it. We really appreciate your feedback on all of the sessions, and look for announcements. We're going to be doing our raffle offline, but the winners will be announced in a follow-up messaging from our leadership group. So with that, everyone, enjoy what's left of your evening and your weekend, and stay safe and be well. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.